Hello, hello. Hey, Andrew, what's up? I couldn't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I got a new MacBook, so I've been like having a good time reinstalling everything.
Oh man, I dropped mine and then had to re-image my old one, and it took like a day and a half, and then getting all the Python environments set up is just such a pain in the ass, and Node, and oh my god.
Yeah, it's taken me like probably like a full day, and then maybe a little bit till like today. I got it over the weekend, so I had some time, but still, yeah.
Did you get an M1 fancy?
Yeah, I got the I got the newest one that has the it's got the Pro chip, because I finally I've been saving up for a while, and I finally decided that I was ready to upgrade to a decent machine to have for home, because I used to stuff like this and whatever, kind of justified it in my head, and then I figured this is future proof, because it'll be good for 5 years probably, just based on my last experience with my previous MacBook.
Yeah.
But yeah, but they're really cool. The keyboard's really nice too. I think it's the same as the butterflies or keys or whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm.
But that's very comfortable, and it's very cool. It doesn't get hot. So that might change over time. But.
Cool. All righty. It is time to go. Cool. We've got Andrew Evans again. We're doing more React testing. Super good feedback from everyone after the first one, if you were at the first one. And yeah, we'll probably keep these going. So yeah, we're covering, again, unit tests, integration tests, regression tests, end-to-end stuff. Ooh, E22, that's not right. E2E.
Yeah, that was a typo on my part too.
Oh really? Oh, I gotta go update that.
Yeah. I saw that in the original post, but anyway, sorry, continue.
Cool. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, big yellow thing here. We're gonna send this recording maybe like an hour after we're done here, so if you have to bounce, no worries. And then as always, shoot me an email, luke@logrocket.com, if you want anything in particular covered, as well as please send messages in the chat or the QA, and we'll definitely get to them. We had a lot of really good ones last time. So, and yeah, this meetup's brought to you by LogRocket. We're a front-end application monitoring solution, integrate really nicely with React, and I like this topic a lot because it's basically like testing in production for all of our users. So, we're kind of writing synthetic tests, and what LogRocket gives you is the visibility into this test passed in development cycles and in production. Did it actually pass for our real users once features get shipped and all that? If you want to learn more, we have a weekly demo for next Wednesday at 1 or 1:30. Sign up for that. I'm going to send that link along too with the recording here. So with that, I'll shut up.
Cool. All right, let me share my screen, and then we can get going. All right, so I think it would be, yes. Oh, hold on. Okay, can you see my screen, everybody, or Luke?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I got a new MacBook, so I've been having to fix everything every time I do anything. So, all right. So, like Luke said, today we're gonna talk about React testing. Testing is super important for a bunch of different reasons. Basically, like in the talk today, I'm going to cover what I'd already blogged this, so a lot of this content, like I'll have the link at the end that you can refer back to, and then I have a sample project right here that I'm going to be running, so we can kind of follow along. The sample project I also did is fun. It's a basically a meal planning app, and it's I have a hosted version of it that's at jessechowchow.com, totally free. If you're interested in playing with it, feel free to go in there and you can create an account and do everything. All right, so testing. So as I said, testing is important for a lot of reasons. In the talk today, I'm going to basically introduce why it's important, like how do you write tests, what type of tests there are, like Luke mentioned unit tests, integration tests, regression tests, end-to-end tests, and then I'll address like questions obviously at the end. So a little bit about me. I work for CapTech Consulting, manager, and I have over 10 years of industry experience, and I do primarily like front end stuff now, but I've done like full stack, over the last 10 years. So why is testing so important? All right, so testing is important because basically, we every day like we write code, and the problem is that you need documentation, you need to be able to know with some certainty that what you're doing works, and then it also helps you with like change management as you go forward. So basically, if you write tests on your code, it's documenting features within your project. And then it also enforces clean code practices, because basically as you're testing your code, a lot of things surface, like you'll see inconsistencies between shared components, or like, certain things that you probably wouldn't see any other way, because it kind of highlights that. When you make changes, the nice part is if you have a test suite that, is exercising like the different features in your project, any change that you do, you could run the test suite against, and then you can verify that what you did is not going to break what you have, if that makes sense. And that's kind of the concept of like a regression test. There's a large plethora of tools. Today I'm primarily going to focus on Jest and Cypress. The Cypress is a really nice end-to-end testing tool. If you've been around for a while, you've also probably heard Selenium WebDriver, which is kind of like a competitor, which is also good for a lot of reasons. I like Cypress personally just because of the developer experience, and then it's a very low learning curve, so it's very easy to get up and running, and you'll see that when I do the demo. So as I said, Jest is probably the other word I'm going to focus on. Jest is using, Chai, it's using Mocha, it's using like Jasmine. All these terms are things that you would see if you pop up, a Google search and try to look up like testing. But Jest allows you to, it encapsulates all that. And so you install it. It comes with, I think it comes with Create React App. And then most React people are familiar with Jest enough to know that it's there. And then just has like a lot of great documentation. If you just type in Jest, you can go here, and they have like, documentation here, information about the API. You can do like some customizations with them, but there's a lot of cool stuff that you can do that is way beyond the scope of this presentation, but you should refer back to. So finally, as I mentioned, I'm going to be referring to my React testing app, with our little sample app, and I'll pull that up in just a second. So that's all like kind of a high level. When you write tests, there's a standard pattern that you basically follow, and this is true for pretty much any type of test. So normally you always hear the 3 A's: arrange, act, and assert. Arrange refers to setting the test up, so that's basically either mocking out some information to test against, or like creating like a maybe seeding a database. Act means you're actually like running the test, so you're exercising the code, with the mocked values or whatever you've done to set it up. And then assert is you're verifying that once you've done your action, what is the result is what you expect it to be. So basically these three kind of terms you'll see a lot if you do any type of like robust test suites and that kind of stuff. And so I'm going to be using those three terms, today. So let's see it in action. So arrange, act, assert, we have arrange right here. So when you have, so this is a sample test, and this is just what I would consider like a unit test. And what you have here is you're basically creating a mock div that you can actually run your test against. and then you're injecting, you know, the container element so that you actually have something to, just as something to exercise. What we have here is if you use act, act is actually not just, hold on, my screen went blank, sorry about that. Act is not just, you know, arrange, act, assert, but act is also, it's a keyword in the React testing library and Jest. And what it is it basically is a tool that like emulates, you know, your front end. So that's kind of like what you're seeing here. So what we're doing is we've set up the test and for each, we're doing act where we're actually rendering, you know, whatever we're trying to do. In this case, I've got a header component that I'm putting, and then we check once it's rendered that the content should be Chessy Chow Chow. So basically we have the arrange, setting it up. Act is, you know, actually exercising it with the act tool that comes out of the Jest or React testing library. And then finally we check to make sure that it's valid. So it's a super simple test. When you get into the different types of tests, we have unit tests. Unit tests is basically what you see here. We're doing things where like we're checking to make sure values appear in the components that we've, you know, made. We also might check to see like behaviors when people click through like certain things. Regression tests, which I mentioned a second ago, is basically any type of test that is going to, you would run on a regular basis, and you're basically just making sure that a new change is not breaking. And that's what, you know, kind of the purpose of those are. If you have something like an end-to-end test, that's a full exercise of everything. So you have your front, back end, everything it's running, and you know you're hoping that obviously everything will work correctly when you do that. Integration tests are basically the last one, and they more or less cover if you have like an external API that you want to pull in, or if even within the same project, maybe you have like a big monolith or something, and you've got two different pieces inside the monolith that need to talk. You could do an integration test to make sure all that stuff is there. So the integration test, this is an example integration test. So basically what we have here is within the Chessy Chow Chow app that I have, I am making sure that the actual save of the meal is happening. So basically, or no, this is making sure that it's got like a dummy kind of, you know, edit, it unlocks, and then save, and it locks like a button. So that's what this is testing. But you could do the same thing for something that actually calls an API directly or something like that. But this is the same pattern that we saw a minute ago. We're creating a mock value right up here. So this will be kind of the arrange. We have render, which is a different like function that's available in Jest or the React testing library, which does the same thing as act, like what I was just showing you a second ago. Then we have the expect, and so you're expecting once a container is rendered, it's going to have this, and then we have an instance of the edit button, the save button, and then we're checking it to be enabled, then disabled, and you know the like. Now, these things like screen right here, those are keywords or functions that come out of the Jest and the React testing library as well. So React testing library is very, very robust, and I'll show you that in just a second. But there's a lot of cool things that they try to help you, and it's pretty well documented, and there's a pretty nice community behind it. So if you have problems, it's pretty easy to find a solution. And so regression tests, just like I was talking about before, is basically making sure what you've done doesn't break what you've done in the past. So like a new change doesn't break that. If like on a side tangent here, like if basically you didn't have regression tests, you would have to manually run through everything in your app to make sure this new change that you did is not going to break something. If you have these,
Andrew, could you put this into like full screen, the slideshow button?
Oh, sure. There you go. There you go. Is that
like click the slideshow thing right there in the top right, just to make it like big?
Oh, gotcha. View slideshow. There you go. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, man. I can't believe I didn't do that. I meant to do that when we first started. I'm sorry. Okay. So basically, like, like I was saying, regression tests, you're checking to make sure the new change that you did doesn't break, something that you had done before. Most of the time, like unit as a developer, unit tests are something that you typically will do a lot. You'll also do a lot of end-to-end tests, because that's typically kind of like the things that you're worried about as a developer. But regression tests are more for like maintenance of the application and kind of the longevity. So when you do regression tests, typically this might take a little bit more time, because maybe you might have, I used to work at a company that they had a whole tool that would basically seed a whole database and then run the test overnight against that like seeded thing. But there's a lot of orchestration there. This doesn't have to be that way. I'm just saying that, essentially, when you start getting into like building regression tests, typically you're going to spend a little bit more time, which is totally fine. And it's also very beneficial to both you and the business. So finally, the end-to-end tests, as I said, full, exercise, front, back end, the whole thing. What these screenshots are is this is of Cypress. So basically we have a test runner right here, and then it creates an emulated version of Chrome, and then it's running the test against the your code. So basically, like, and it's even documenting here in the little console what it's doing. So you see, like, it's getting this button, it's doing a click, it's logging something that I've put in the test. We're getting another thing, making sure where the fields are clear, and there's you can be very kind of verbose here if you want. I made this very simple because it's obviously just a demo app. So then I think that we're ready for the demo. So let me switch out of, there it is. Okay. All right. And then let me pull up VS Code. Okay. So this is the sample app that I've been referring to, the Jesse Chow Chow. Basically, this is a very simple application. I use Redux because I like Redux, but you didn't have to do that here. But basically, we have your components. We have pages, which is basically like literally like a page. Some people call them containers, and this is kind of architected in the same way that you would typically see in like an enterprise application. Redux is obviously like got all of the Redux stuff. Not going to go into that here. And then obviously have styles. So nothing super exciting until you get to tests. So Jest has, you basically, you can tell Jest to go and look in a certain directory. There's like configuration or whatever, but I believe the default is to have it in the _ tests folder, like you see right here. So these are essentially the tests, and these are, some of these are what I was showing you in the slides. This is the test that I did, the first one, the range act assert, because we have, we're creating the div, we are acting on it right here, and then we're verifying the values that came across. That's just basically checking the header component. The header component is like really stupid small. This is all the header component is, and so there's a whole lot to test there. If you get into things like weekday tests, so this is what I was talking about with there's like an edit and save button that like basically is activated when you do one action and then deactivated when you do another one. And so this is essentially exercising that. So this is a little bit bigger because we have essentially like a mock function. We're using render to create the instance of the component, making sure that this value appears. Then we're using this, now that everything is rendered, we're doing an additional couple of steps here where we're looking at the individual buttons, passing some actions to them, and then making sure that when I click on something, this is what you see. Probably somebody is going to ask about the fact that like in here I've done several assertions. That's totally up to you. Some people are very strict about this, and they you make every test very minuscule. Some people like to have things grouped together. It really depends on the team and kind of the need that you have. The title test is the same kind of silly test that I've got, and same thing with the error. So there's not a whole lot there. So let's talk about what it looks like in the console. So there isn't really a whole lot to show you here, but basically, if I do unit test, what this does is this is getting Jest to go and run the test. And so these are the tests that I was just showing you. And so if you notice, like out in the console, you have renders title fits correctly, renders without error values, and all the like. The nice part about this is that you could potentially send this out to like Kibana or some logging mechanism and save, runs of your tests. So then you know what passed and what didn't, or in any type of like CI/CD platform. That's where that kind of becomes useful. Now we can talk about Cypress. So I'm just going to go do this. This is going to take a second to run so I can talk about it while it's running. So basically, Cypress is a full like kind of end-to-end tool. There's a lot that goes into Cypress. There's a lot of really cool things that they've done as a company and whatever else. But basically, to use it in your application, all you do is you install it as a dev dependency, similar to how you would do other things like Prettier or something like that. Then when you do that, it initially creates this folder. So if you notice right here, we have Cypress. Within Cypress, we have fixtures, integration, plugins, and support. So fixtures are basically, this would be like mock data. So you can think of like, if you have like a mock response or something you want to do, you just save those as JSON files and then they become available to your tests. Integration, this is typically where your tests actually reside. What you'll see here is you're using the Sci object, which is basically the instance of Chrome. Like it emulates an instance of Chrome, and then you're passing actions to it. So that's basically what you see in the integration. Plugins, they have a lot of different types of plugins you can pull in for advanced logging and that kind of stuff. And then in support, you have this thing called commands. I didn't do anything here, but what they recommend that you do with commands is actually you can take boilerplate code. So like say you have an application that needs to log in, before anything can happen. You could put that code here and then have basically reference it in your test. So then you only write it once and use it in many places, which is very beneficial and keeps your code dry. So the test that I'll show you, I think it's started now. Yes, here we go. Okay, so this is a little Cypress test runner, and there's a CI version of this also that I'll show you as soon as I finish this. But basically, you can either run them together. You can run just the one. Side note: if you notice over here, we have Chrome and Electron. Cypress is also supported with Firefox, and I believe Edge. I think they are expanding through their to other browsers. But that's always been kind of a typical argument to use Selenium, which is their competitor, because they are like cross-browser compatible, whereas this one is mainly focused on Chrome. It's up to you, kind of what you want to do. But even in that case, to me as a developer, it's a huge win because, I'm actually exercising my code. When you get into things where you're dealing with like cross-platform stuff, most of the time that's like kind of a one-off thing. So you're already kind of testing that special. So that's, just something to consider. So now we have the first spec and meal spec. I'm going to just run the meals one because I want to show you more of the verbose stuff. So this is the emulated version of Chrome. If you notice right here, this is real time hitting the app. So like this is a local, version of the app running. It's going in here, it's adding the different values. And a couple things to note here. This is like basically the log of what's actually happened. But if you notice, as I'm like moving my mouse, things are changing. That's actually basically a time travel feature where you can, at any point, like if I click on this, that's what the app was doing at that point in the test. That's super helpful because say like you got here and then all of a sudden something went wonky, you can basically pull this down and figure out like what was going on, kind of at that point. You also have access to, if you hit inspect, there's the standard, DevTools console. So like you can treat it almost as like a mini version of your app that you're running, and you can even like print stuff out of the console and stuff like that. The other thing is that when you write your tests, if you notice this, this one isn't super great because I'm basically using XPath queries. So I'm like just looking at styles, and so it's looking for like an object inside an object inside an object. But this looks kind of intimidating because there's a lot there. The cool part with Cypress is that basically, if you use Cypress, if you go in here and you click on Open Selector Playground, what this will do is if you click on this object, this actually will write out the query, and then all you have to do is go back in your code, and I'm not going to save this, but I will show you. That's the essentially query for that object to run the test against. It's all written for you. something that I thought was actually really cool that I just recently found out about is there's also a thing called Cypress Studio. So if you look at Cypress Studio, what this does is it essentially like watches you use your application, and then it actually writes tests for you, or at least writes out like what you're doing. There's a thing called, I think, Kotlin Studio that used to do this. And then there's like, there's a couple other tools that kind of do this kind of thing, but this is really cool because one of the biggest questions that people have when they first start working with Cypress is they're like, oh gosh, this is a new tool. I've already got like an existing app, do I really want to spend all this time? This will accelerate that because you're able to quickly get up and running, and then you're just basically, cleaning up small nuances or small issues that the tests might, have along the way. So, so that was a cool tool. I haven't really used this yet, but I'm super excited to try to use it on a client sometime soon. Finally, the last thing was when I mentioned running it in CI. So if I go back to my terminal, so I'm just going to go ahead and kill the process. Now, if I run Cypress CI, what this does is this is going to run essentially a headless version of the application, and then it's going to go and actually, here it is. It's actually going to run the test. And this is very similar to what we saw when we ran the unit test. So everything is being logged out to the console. You're seeing the run starting, it passed, it would visit the home page. Now it's running the meal spec. It's giving you some like metrics about like how it's run. But again, all this stuff can be like passed out to a log, or you could like, just write it out to your CI/CD platform of choice. When you do this, the cool part is also that if you look over here, all of a sudden there's a videos folder. So this is so let me collapse the rest of these. So this is the Cypress folder that I talked about when I said Cypress started. If you go over to videos, you notice that there's these MP4 files that are being created. These are essentially live runs of your tests. So let me go over here and I'll show you the meal spec. So this is actually like a video of the test running, which is super cool and very useful if you need to like report out to like a product owner, or maybe your team wants to see where the test failed. These also run if the test fails. So you have like literally like something to visually see, before you go forward. So I thought that was kind of cool. That's all configurable. As you see, it's grayed out here because I've made it part of the git ignore in this project, but that's basically everything. So if I go back to my original presentation, sorry, Zoom keeps doing this thing to my window. Oh, of course not. Oh, okay. Let's try that again. All right. So, so the last thing was like, obviously I'm going to open it up for questions. But I just want to like reiterate that testing with React is really helpful. It's really useful, and it will accelerate your team's ability to like produce code and, output a product. The reason is because it makes maintenance easier, just documenting your features, and then it also kind of keeps your code clean, which is very important. And the last thing I'll say is that if you look at React, I think it's React testing recipes. This is actually a site that was created by the React team. And basically this has some common patterns. So this has a lot of stuff like what I was showing you with unit tests. And this is where I got a lot of these examples because it just does a really nice job. And you see, it's like showing you how to do everything. And this is a little bit more in depth. And obviously, as you're learning, you're probably going to want to be looking here first versus just like, speeding through a thing like this. But this is a really great place to go to learn. So with that, I can open it up for questions.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, we got two that are pretty similar. Yeah, how should we know when to use act, seeing as testing library includes it out of the box? It's render function, but sometimes you still get errors, and then the other ones is act and render synonymous.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm actually like not 100% sure about like what the difference is, because I've used them like basically for the same thing. But I would assume that there's probably like if you look at like the actual documentation for the React testing library, there's probably like a specific use case. Like maybe you're only doing shallow components, or like something that, there's probably some something there, but I would say just like try it out and then go to the documentation.
And then for the, I forget what it's called with like the XPath selectors, that test, like when you're using styled components, how would that work since like the class names are random strings and they change every build?
Yeah. So what so this is like, I probably should update this whole thing a little bit because what I've done like at client sites and like in the real world is use test IDs. So there's like a thing called data test ID. You basically it's code that you've put in your code, but it doesn't actually hurt anything in production and whatever. But these test IDs allows the test runner to go directly, to those values, and that's what Cypress normally recommends because it's a lot more clear. You can give a test ID like Andrew Button or something, and then it'll go there versus like header, div, span, whatever.
Yep. Are there any open source projects where we can look up some master level tests? I guess like a really more complicated application that has a bunch of tests already done.
Yeah, so I think Kent Dodds did something like this. There's quite a few, like if you look up like his like stuff, like he's done like talks on it and that kind of thing. But I would say honestly, like just find maybe like one of your favorite open source projects or something like that, and then like just go check it out. And I mean, most of the stuff that I've learned when it comes to this kind of stuff that's how I've done it. Like I'll look at, I don't know how to do something, so I'll Google it and then I'll go look at like, what somebody else is doing out in the wild.
Yeah, Ken stuff is great on this. And yeah, we got this one last time, but what's your take on test-driven development, especially on the front end?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't do it. And I'll be honest. Everybody's always like, oh, that's the coolest thing. You should be doing it. And like I totally like appreciate that. Like I think it's a cool. I've watched all the Uncle Bob videos. You should Google him if you're familiar. But like my big thing with that is that a lot of times like a good clean architecture is really important. And if you do like TDD, what you end up doing is you're building around tests, which, I get like functionally it's going to force you to like do all these things, but it's like if you can sit down and have like a good solid architectural discussion when you start a project and then you build everything out incrementally, I've always found that's better. But that's just like, industry experience that I've had. But there's people out there that like swear by TDD, and I definitely am not saying it's bad because I see the value. It's just my personal preference isn't to use it.
Cool. I guess that's a follow-up. So yeah, if you're not doing test-driven development, are most of your test regression tests or defense against potential regression?
So I've had two experiences. One, I was on a monolith project that I came to late and there was no tests. And we like slowly, like basically as a team, we said we need tests, but we don't have enough time to like build out this whole suite. So we did a thing where every sprint, if you build a feature, you build a test. So it was kind of like a new thing. And then if you fix bugs, you'd also create a test around the bug. That's like one way to kind of like do it over time. The other way that we've done it is kind of the good architectural discussion where like when we first started, I worked with the team and we were all like, okay, from the get-go, we're going to be writing tests. So I think it's kind of, it's whatever, tests are really only there to help you. So it's like, you can do whatever you do will probably help. It's not, you don't necessarily have to have this like 100% code coverage, purity, kind of thing, because it's really about like what's going to help you write code faster and stuff like that.
Yeah. We got one more or a couple more actually. And I've actually got one too, but managing mock data can sometimes be challenging for me. Is there a pattern you use to have dry tests, or do you prefer wet tests as some people? I don't actually know what dry or wet is referring to.
Dry is do not repeat yourself.
Okay.
I've never actually heard the term wet, but I think it's kind of funny that that's the other one. But yeah, like the pattern so what we did for my last client was, write everything twice. Oh, that's cool. learned something new today.
Mhm.
So like basically what was I gonna say? The what I saw, mock data is a challenge. Okay. What we did with the last client that I used is a good example. We had APIs. We had a couple of different APIs that we were using. They have like very big payloads. The way that this app had worked, it was hitting certain points, and you'd get all like the state data and stuff like that from those points. Anyway, what we did was we basically recorded that, or we like consoled it out, and then we use that as our mock. And then whenever those APIs would change, we would go back and like update our tests, based on it. So that's kind of like one thing. And then, I'm really excited about Cypress Studio, to be honest. So like, I'm wondering if they might have something there, because I don't know how Cypress Studio actually logs the content. And that's this is like in my queue of things I want to learn about. So stay tuned. Maybe next time we'll know more. So
Yeah. And then like, yeah, when you've got like mock data and like the commands I was looking at, with like Puppeteer, it's kind of tough to like persist cookies and like post login. Like, does Cypress handle that pretty well? Like after you do that login, does it like actually create like save that to your Chrome profile and everything?
yeah. So basically they have a couple of different things. Like they basically they recommend that you try to automate that login feature, so you can do it like in the background. I went kind of heavy into this a while back, and like I think depending on the way that you do, this was specific for login, but the way that you handle auth, they had different patterns that you can kind of obfuscate it. But like the idea is that basically everything would be like put into a boilerplate like kind of section, and then you could just exercise that in the background. So like basically when you run your tests, this thing is going to run like kind of under the covers, and then Cypress is going to remember what's going on. When we did it on my last client, now that I remember, there's a thing called session. I think it's like session history or something like that, and it actually is just the state of your test, and you can purge it or clear it in between different runs. But that's what we did, and that also helps with caching. If you're gonna do a bunch of like API calls, you can cache responses that way.
Yep. Okay, so similar. Yeah. All right, Rosemary asked, and that's pretty interesting. Like, we've gotten similar questions before on like kind of like the managerial call of like, people say you either need a million tests and full coverage, or fewer, and it sounds like you're a little bit on the fewer side. But where do you tend to draw the line when you test on components? That's integration testing, correct? That was a question too.
Yeah.
Like, too many tests slow down the project. Like, how do you kind of make that call? And I guess how would you know if you were right?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's definitely one of those things where like it's going to be up to the team, it'll be up to like the business side that maybe you're dealing with. Like if the business side doesn't care about tests, then this is really just for developers, and like you should look at it, as whatever we need as a team to do. If the business side cares a lot about tests and wants the 100% code coverage, I've been on teams that they did that. The problem with that is that when you start getting into stuff where it's like what you're actually exercising isn't really needed to be exercised. Like you're basically just like showing something on the screen, and then you're just like, that'll never go wrong, right? I mean, it's always going to be like the same thing shown. So basically my only word of caution with the 100% thing is that like, what does it actually mean? Because most of the time the tools that you use to verify that, I think Istanbul is the library, or one of the libraries that does that. The problem with that is that it's just the functionality. Like is it really useful, and should you potentially waste time trying to get that number when you're really more focused on just like I said, like feature delivery or feature testing?
Yeah. And I guess, yeah, is there like a general threshold for coverage you go for?
Yeah, most of the time, I think it's like 85%. I think that's what I've seen. Yeah, but I mean, like, like I told you, like tests are just there to help. So it's like if you have 30% coverage, that's better than 0. So.
Yeah. And then let's see. Lots of good questions. Keep them coming. What kind of like core functionality do you think is like, if you were to do a couple and not get to that 85% coverage number, like is it more important to do like render, get like state coverage functions. I know one team I work with does like only render stuff because it's like it's not a very feature rich app. It just needs to show some stuff. So like, yeah, do you have any kind of guidance there?
Yeah, I mean, you just, basically said it. Like, I would say like whatever the team wants or needs, like
Yeah.
whatever the project calls for. I think that if you wanted to, you could spend the rest of your life writing tests.
Yeah.
So it's good. You kind of got to draw the line at some point. But yeah, I would just say like whatever's the most important thing probably for your team. That's probably what I would do.
Cool. And then have you ever faced timeout issues when testing code?
Yeah, so it's interesting that they brought that up. So like there is one of the things about Cypress is that Cypress runs alongside your application. So if you run like Cypress, it's basically the test runner, and then you have like another thread where your application's running, but you essentially have access to all the source code and whatever. Because of that, I typically haven't seen that many issues with timeout with Cypress because most of the time, actions are going across. We had a problem with my last client where basically some of the API calls took a long time. Like we would submit, like it's the same one I was talking about with like the point thing. We had a big, huge payload that we were shooting across the wire, coming back. And so what I ended up having to do is I had to use waits. So they have like a wait command. Where I've experienced a lot of timeouts with testing, honestly, is actually with Selenium WebDriver. I've used that like pretty much exclusively until about 2 years ago when I like started playing with Cypress. And like with that, everything can be flaky, like your machine can just like not like you for that day, and all of a sudden all your tests are failing. And then like you pull up your buddy in the seat next to you and he can run everything fine. So it's like, that's one of the arguments against using them, but that gets into like synchronicity issues. And then, one team that I was on, it was funny because the guy that wrote the test didn't really understand JavaScript. And so basically he was running and he was just writing code that he didn't really understand, like async await. So like he would run stuff, a bunch of asynchronous things. And if he ran it just the right way, it would finish before the test was finished because it took so long to like get through everything. But he didn't have any waits, he didn't have anything, and that created all kinds of headaches. And we finally realized what the guy was doing. And I was like, dude, this is not how JavaScript works. You have to like go back in and work on it. So
Sounds like me a couple years ago, or
yeah.
like yesterday.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was me yesterday.